My heart pounded in my chest as I stood at the altar, looking into the eyes of the man I had loved for so many years. The crowd was hushed, waiting for the sacred moment to unfold. My hands were trembling, my wedding dress heavy with the weight of anticipation, but there was a nagging feeling gnawing at me, a feeling I couldn't shake. Little did I know, my whole life was about to unravel in front of everyone. The pastor's voice was a faint hum in my ears as I tried to focus. Do you, Bola, take Adewale to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and cherish him in sickness and health, for richer or poorer? I barely heard the words. My mind was racing, flashing back to the countless nights I had spent alone, wondering why he had become so distant. Had I been blind? The signs had always been there, but I had ignored them. The late nights at work, the sudden phone calls he refused to take in front of me, the absence of his usual warmth. But I never imagined this. Then the moment came, the worst moment of my life. Adewale's eyes met mine, and for a brief second, I thought I saw regret. But what he said next would haunt me forever. I can't do this, he said, his voice loud enough for the whole church to hear. My heart stopped. I stared at him, unsure if I had heard him right. What do you mean? He stepped back, looking at me as though I were a stranger. I can't marry you, Bola. I'm sorry, but I just can't. The room went silent, but it wasn't the kind of silence that was comforting. It was suffocating. My hands grew clammy as I tried to process his words. What do you mean you can't marry me? We're here. Everything is ready, the vows. He cut me off. I've been seeing someone else, and I don't love you anymore. I'm sorry, but I can't live this lie. The world tilted around me. I was paralyzed, standing there, staring at the man I thought I would grow old with. How had I not seen it coming? How had I been so blind? My mind raced, every moment of our relationship flashing before my eyes. The laughter, the promises, the plans. And now, this. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had worked too hard for this moment, for this life, for this future. I had been patient, supportive, everything he asked for. But in that moment, I realized just how little he cared about me. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone, a woman to fill a role until something better came along. And that's when I heard it. The loud murmur from the crowd, the whispers that turned into a roar. My own mother stood up, her face red with embarrassment. Adewale, how dare you? She shouted, her voice shaking with anger. But it wasn't the anger that stung the most. It was the shame of being humiliated in front of everyone. My own wedding, my own family, and here he was, shattering me in front of them all. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I turned to walk away, my legs like jelly beneath me. And then, just as I was about to step off the altar, Adewale said something else that stopped me cold. I've known about the property you inherited, Bola. The $900 million worth of real estate. It's why I stuck around this long. I froze, the words ringing in my ears like a death sentence. How did he know? The property. My late father's land. My inheritance. He had never cared for me, but the money, that was what had kept him around. And now, in my most vulnerable moment, he had used it as leverage. The crowd gasped. Some of them knew. Some didn't. But I could see it in their eyes. They knew that this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about betrayal. Greed. Adewale's voice continued, like poison dripping from his lips. I was only after what I could get from you, Bola. But now I'm done. You can keep your money. I don't need it. With those final words, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there alone, humiliated, with my life shattered into a million pieces. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to comprehend what had just happened. But as the realization hit me, a cold fury took over. I had spent years loving this man, supporting him, giving him everything, and he had used me. My eyes narrowed. No, This was not how my story was going to end. But I had no idea what he had set in motion that day. No idea how deep the betrayal ran. And no idea that the worst was yet to come. Welcome to Stories by Anif. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family. The weeks that followed were a blur of anger, disbelief, and shame. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls, messages, and missed voicemails. Some were from well-meaning family members who tried to console me, while others were from gossip-hungry friends who wanted to know every detail of my disaster. But all I could do was stare at the walls of my apartment, the empty space around me a constant reminder of everything I had lost. I couldn't go back to work right away. I couldn't bring myself to face the people who knew what had happened. The humiliation was still fresh in my mind, like a wound that refused to heal. But one thing became clear to me through all of this. I had to get my life back together, for myself. Not for Adewale, not for anyone else, but for me. I knew what had to be done. I had to reclaim my identity, rebuild the life that Adewale had tried to destroy, and make sure he never thought he could get away with what he had done. That $900 million property was mine. It had always been mine, and I would use it as a weapon to take control of my future. But before I could start that journey, something happened that changed everything. One afternoon, as I sat in my living room staring at my phone, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing there was a man I had never met before. Tall, dark, and serious, he held out a business card to me, his face expressionless. "I'm Femi," he said simply. "I'm here to help you." I stared at him, confused. "Help me? Help me with what?" Femi's expression didn't change, but his eyes were intense, scanning my face as though trying to assess my every emotion. "I was sent by your family's legal team. Your father left instructions. You've inherited much more than just property, Bola. There are things you don't know, and people you need to avoid." My heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? What more was there to this inheritance? I thought I knew everything about my father's estate, but his words made me question everything. Femi stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence immediately filling the room. "There's a complex web of people who are after your inheritance, Bola. And some of them, well, they aren't exactly who they seem." I felt a lump form in my throat. Who could possibly be after my inheritance? Adewale had already taken what he wanted, and now my mind raced with possibilities. Could it be someone in my family? Or had Adewale told others about the estate? The thought made me sick. Femi sat down, his gaze never leaving me. "There are things about your father's assets that even your mother doesn't know about. Your father was more involved in some shady deals than anyone realizes. This property isn't just valuable. It's a target." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "So what do I do now? What's the next step?" Femi leaned forward, his tone lowering. "You need to understand something. This is not just about money. This is about power. And right now, you're in the middle of something bigger than you think." I stared at him, my pulse quickening. The anger, the betrayal, all of it was now starting to feel like something much more dangerous. My father's legacy was a weapon, and I didn't know who else was gunning for it. But I was done being the victim. I was done letting people walk all over me. Femi stood up, handing me a file. "There's a list of people involved in this. But be careful, Bola. Trust no one." With that, he turned and left as quickly as he had come, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. The file he left behind contained names, dates, and documents that made my head spin. Names of business associates my father had worked with, others who had been involved in his real estate dealings. But what caught my attention was one name at the bottom of the list. Adewale. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My soon-to-be ex-husband had been a part of my father's business dealings? How could I have been so blind? It was all starting to make sense now. His sudden wealth, his manipulative behavior. He had never loved me. He had only wanted access to what I had. But now I knew what I had to do. The first step was clear. Adewale would never get his hands on my inheritance. But that was just the beginning. I would take back control. I would make him pay for everything he had done to me, for everything he had stolen, and for the lies he had told. But there was one thing I hadn't counted on. One person I hadn't expected to be involved in this game of betrayal. My own mother. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My hands trembled as I flipped through the file that Femi had left behind. The names of various business partners and deals my father had made were one thing, but seeing Adewale's name in connection to my father's properties felt like a dagger to my heart. Why hadn't I known? How could I have been married to this man, sharing my life with him, when all along he was part of the very thing that was meant to secure my future? The truth was that I didn't know who I could trust anymore, not even my family. But as the hours passed and I pored over the documents, my mind began to race. I had to confront Adewale, but I knew it wouldn't be as simple as that. If he had been involved with my father's business dealings, what else was he hiding? What was the true nature of his betrayal? The next morning I reached out to Femi. I needed more answers. He had dropped the bombshell, but there were still too many pieces of the puzzle missing. I need to know everything, Femi. What exactly is Adewale's role in all of this? I demanded over the phone. Femi's voice was calm but firm. Your father's estate isn't just about property, Bola. It's tied up in various offshore accounts and investments that Adewale knew about. He's been running things behind your back for years. Years. I couldn't even begin to wrap my mind around the fact that the man I had married had been playing me for so long. My mind swirled with the idea of what he could have been doing during all that time. But then, Femi dropped another bombshell. There's more. Your mother was also involved in these dealings, Bola. She's not as innocent as you think. My stomach dropped. My mother? How could she have been involved in this? She had always been the moral center of our family. The one who preached loyalty, honor, and trust. But as the words sank in, I realized that maybe I had been wrong about her. Maybe I had been blind to her own part in this dark game. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But Femi had no reason to lie to me, and the documents in my hands were too clear to ignore. I needed to confront her. I needed answers. Later that day, I drove to my mother's house. The air was thick with tension as I entered her home, my heart pounding in my chest. She was in the living room, sipping tea, just as she always did when I came by. But this time, the air between us felt different, like a veil had been lifted, and the truth was just waiting to be uncovered. Mom, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. What's going on with all these business dealings? Femi said you were involved in some of Dad's investments, and I need to know the truth. Her face stiffened, her fingers tightening around the teacup. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. I don't know what you mean, Bola, she stammered. But the quiver in her voice told me everything I needed to know. Your father, he kept things from you. It was never meant for you to get involved in all of this. I sat down across from her, leaning forward. So it's true. You knew about Adewale and you knew about the money. How long have you known, Mum? Her eyes flickered to the side, and for a brief moment, I saw her expression crack. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear of what I might do once I knew the whole truth. I didn't want you to know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your father's world. It was dangerous. There were things he had to do to protect the family. And sometimes the people closest to you, they don't always have your best interests at heart. Her words hung in the air like poison. You knew all this? "And you didn't tell me?" I asked, my voice barely holding back the fury that had started to rise inside me. "You let me marry a man who was only after my money, and you said nothing?" She didn't answer, her gaze drifting to the floor. My hands clenched into fists as I tried to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. This wasn't just about Adewale anymore. This was about my own flesh and blood. My mother had known about his deception, and she hadn't warned me. "What else, Mum? What else do you know?" I demanded. I needed the full truth now. I needed to understand everything, no matter how painful. For the first time, she looked me in the eyes. "I knew Adewale was interested in your inheritance, Bola, but I didn't know how far he would go. Your father was in deep with people who could destroy everything we had. I only wanted to protect you, but in the end, I think we all got tangled in it. And now, we're all at risk." I stood up, pacing the room, my mind spinning. What had I become part of? What kind of legacy was this? My father's empire was built on lies, and I had unwittingly become a part of that web of betrayal. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let Adewale have anything, and I certainly couldn't trust my mother anymore. She had kept the truth from me, and now I had no choice but to take control of my future. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated. Adewale wasn't just coming after my inheritance. He was coming after my life. And as the days went on, I would realize just how deep his plan went, and how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. It wasn't just Adewale anymore. My world, my life, had become a battlefield. I had always believed that family was my safe haven, my support, but now everything I thought I knew was crumbling beneath me. Every conversation, every glance from my mother, felt like a lie, a web of manipulation that I had been too blind to see. But it wasn't just her I had to worry about now. It was him, Adewale. A few days after my confrontation with my mother, things began to escalate. I started receiving anonymous threats, messages that made my skin crawl. The first one came in the form of a text message. "You think you can take back what's yours? You're wrong, Bola. You're out of your depth." The message was signed with a number I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I read and reread it. Who could this be? Was it Adewale trying to scare me? Or was it someone else, someone connected to the web of corruption that my father had built? I immediately called Femi, but he didn't pick up. He had been less available lately, and I was starting to feel like I was walking this path alone. But I wasn't. Couldn't be. I had no choice but to take matters into my own hands. I started working with my father's old lawyer, a man named Chief Olumide, who had helped him with many of his most complex dealings. The more I worked with him, the more I realized how dangerous my father's world really was. "Your father was more than a businessman, Bola," Chief Olumide said one afternoon, as we sifted through papers in his office. "He had ties to people that even the most powerful wouldn't dare cross. You're playing a very dangerous game now." His words echoed in my mind as I left his office that day. Adewale wasn't just after money. He had been involved in something much darker, and if I didn't act quickly, I would lose everything. Not just the money, but my peace of mind, my safety, and my future. And then it happened. I was on my way home, driving through the bustling streets of Lagos, when I saw a car tailing me. At first, I thought it was just another driver, but when I turned a corner, the car followed. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my heart racing. I sped up. They sped up. I turned left. They turned left. This wasn't a coincidence. I tried to remain calm, but my mind was racing. Was it Adewale? Or was it someone else involved in this tangled mess? Whoever it was, they were clearly not going to let me go without a fight. I had to lose them. I swerved down a narrow alley, my tires screeching as I cut through the streets, trying to shake off the car following me. I could hear the engine of the car behind me revving louder. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. I could barely think straight. What was I supposed to do? Where could I go? I made a sharp turn into a side street, and just as I thought I had lost them, the car appeared right behind me again. Then, as if fate had finally decided to give me a break, I saw the flashing lights of a police car up ahead. Without thinking, I swerved toward the police car and honked my horn frantically. The car behind me hesitated, and for a moment, I thought I was free. But then, just as I pulled up to the police car, the black car sped off into the night. The police officer gave me a confused look as I rolled down my window. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, eyeing me cautiously. I could barely speak. I think someone was following me," I managed to say, still trying to catch my breath. The officer nodded, his hand hovering over his radio. "We'll be on the lookout, but you should get home safely. Call us if you see that car again." I nodded, my heart still pounding in my chest. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but also an overwhelming fear. This was just the beginning. If Adewale was involved, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. As I drove home, I tried to process everything that had happened. Adewale's betrayal had taken on a new form. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, control, and the lengths he would go to in order to claim what he thought was his. The threats were real. The danger was real. And it was only going to get worse. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, for protection, and cautiously approached the door. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I think you should know something, Bola," a voice said from the other side. It wasn't Adewale. It wasn't Femi. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The voice was cold, and the words they spoke chilled me to the bone. "If you don't give up the property, Bola, things are going to get a lot worse for you. This is your last warning." And then, before I could react, the voice was gone. I stood there for a long time, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Adewale's game was no longer just a battle for money. It was a battle for my survival. But I had come too far to back down now. I would fight, and I would make sure that anyone who crossed me, especially Adewale, would regret it. The days after the mysterious knock on my door blurred together. I was no longer just grieving the loss of a marriage. I was fighting for my life. Every time I stepped out, I kept my head low, my eyes darting, and my heart racing. Adewale's game had changed. The stakes had been raised, and I was at the center of it. The police hadn't found anything. No trace of the car that had been tailing me. No sign of who had threatened me. It was like they had vanished into thin air, just like Adewale had done on our wedding day. And the worst part? I had no idea who to trust anymore. I couldn't let fear dictate my every move. I needed to plan, to strategize. I had $900 million worth of property at stake. But it was more than that. I had my pride, my freedom, and my dignity. No one was going to take that from me. I started researching everything I could about my father's business dealings, the properties, the investments, the people involved. I contacted a private investigator, someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't be swayed by money or threats. His name was David, and he was known for getting results when others couldn't. "I need to know everything about Adewale and anyone else connected to my father's estate," I told him, my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. "I need to know who's trying to take everything from me." David's response was quick. "I'll start digging into his financials, Bola. But this isn't going to be easy. There's a lot more going on here than just your inheritance." I nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. But I couldn't back down now. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Days passed in a haze of phone calls, meetings, and more threats. But nothing could prepare me for what I would learn next. David called me one afternoon. "Bola, we've got a problem," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "There's a man named Tony Okeke. He's an associate of Adewale's. But it's not just business with him. Tony's got ties to some very dangerous people People who won't hesitate to go after you if they think it'll get them what they want. My stomach twisted as I heard the name. Tony Okeke. A man who had always lingered in the shadows of my father's dealings. A name I had heard but never paid much attention to. I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went. "Who are these people, David?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David sighed. "They're connected to the underground world of real estate and money laundering. They make their money from exploiting people like your father. And now they're coming after you." I felt the room close in around me. My father had been a businessman, yes, but he had also dabbled in things that, as a child, I had never fully understood. I had thought he was just trying to build an empire. But now, I saw the empire he had built was built on blood, sweat, and manipulation. And I was standing in the middle of it, fighting for my survival. I had to act quickly. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. My inheritance, my father's legacy, wasn't just a golden ticket to a better life. It was a target, a weapon that was already being used against me. That night, I went over the file Femi had left for me one last time. I started highlighting names and places that seemed important, things I had overlooked before. I had to be smart. I had to stay ahead of them. But as I reached the end of the file, my eyes stopped on a name that made my blood run cold. Olivia Adewale. My mind raced. Olivia, my ex-husband's sister. How could I have been so blind? All along, she had been the quiet one, the one who stayed in the background while Adewale took center stage. But now everything made sense. I had been so focused on Adewale, so consumed by the betrayal he had laid at my feet, that I hadn't considered the possibility that Olivia might be involved in his schemes. But she had always been around when things got messy. When my father's business dealings were at their peak, she was the one who made sure the paperwork was sorted. She was the one who kept everything running smoothly behind the scenes. And now, it seemed like she had used her position to manipulate me, to play me for a fool. I couldn't confront her alone. I needed to be strategic. I needed leverage. And I had the perfect plan. The next morning, I met with David again. "I want you to follow Olivia. Find out everything she's involved in," I said, my voice cold and determined. "If she's been hiding something, I want to know." David nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll get on it right away. But Bola, be careful. This is bigger than just a business deal or an inheritance. You're playing with people who don't care about who gets hurt." I nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. But there was no turning back now. I had already lost so much. I wasn't about to lose my future. Later that afternoon, I met with my mother again. She had been avoiding me since our last conversation, but I needed to know just how deep she was involved in this. "Tell me everything, Mum," I demanded, my patience wearing thin. "You were involved with Adewale's schemes. You knew what was going on. Why didn't you warn me?" Her face hardened, and for the first time, I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "You think you know everything, Bola?" she snapped. "You think I didn't protect you? You have no idea what I've been trying to shield you from. This world is dangerous, and I did what I thought was best." "Best?" I scoffed. "By letting Adewale use me? By letting him destroy everything we had?" She looked away, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand. I didn't want you to get hurt. But this is bigger than both of us." I stood up, my anger reaching a boiling point. "Then it's time you start helping me, Mum, because I'm done being the victim." The next few days were filled with tension. I had set a plan in motion, and now I had to let it unfold. Olivia, Adewale's sister, was at the center of everything, and I needed answers. If I could get her to slip up, if I could find the key to what she was hiding, it would all fall into place. But there was a nagging doubt that kept eating at me. What if she was too careful? What if she was expecting me to make a move? As much as I hated to admit it, I needed help. And I had no one left but David. He was my only ally in this dangerous game. and now he had to dig deeper into Olivia's life. But before David could deliver any news, the threats kept coming. The phone calls, the anonymous messages, the strange cars that kept showing up around my building. It was all too much to ignore. They were getting bolder, more aggressive. And each day I woke up with the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, the lights flickering above me, I heard a knock at the door. I froze. My pulse raced. I wasn't expecting anyone. I slowly stood up, my mind running through every scenario. I peered through the peephole. It was a man in a suit. His face was unfamiliar, but there was something about him that struck me as dangerous. I hesitated, but after a moment, I opened the door, keeping the chain locked. "Yes?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear I felt rising in my chest. The man didn't speak at first. He just stood there, looking at me with a cold expression. Finally, he spoke. "I'm here to deliver a message," he said flatly. "You've been warned, Bola. You're making a mistake trying to go up against Adewale and his associates. If you continue with this, things will only get worse for you. This is your final warning." I felt the blood drain from my face. My body went cold, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The man didn't look threatening, but I knew better than to trust appearances. The message, however, was clear. I stood my ground, glaring at him through the small opening. "I don't scare easily," I replied, my voice low but firm. "Tell Adewale, tell whoever sent you, I won't back down. If anything, it's you who should be worried." The man's eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he might say something else, but instead, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night without another word. I slammed the door shut, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. Couldn't go back. I couldn't turn around now. I had to finish what I started. The next morning, I received a message from David. The report on Olivia was in. He had tracked her movements for the past week, and what he uncovered was far more than I could have imagined. "She's been meeting with someone," David's message read. "Someone who's connected to the underground network of real estate investors, the ones your father had ties to. I think it's time we confront her." I didn't hesitate. I couldn't wait any longer. I was done being the pawn. It was time to take control. David arranged for a meeting with Olivia, but I wasn't going to let it happen the way he suggested. I wasn't going to show up unprepared. I wanted answers, but I also wanted leverage. I needed to get inside her head. I needed to break her down, make her see that the only way she was going to come out of this unscathed was if she worked with me. But it wouldn't be easy. Olivia was always careful, always 2 steps ahead. We met at a small cafe in the heart of the city, far from the watchful eyes of anyone who could be listening. I was nervous, but I kept it hidden behind a calm exterior. As I walked into the cafe, I spotted Olivia sitting in the corner, her back straight, her eyes cold. The moment she saw me, her face didn't change. But there was something in her eyes, something that told me she wasn't as composed as she was pretending to be. "Bola," she said, her voice flat, almost too practiced. "I didn't expect you to show up. What is this about?" I took a seat across from her, folding my arms. "You know exactly what this is about, Olivia. You've been lying to me. You've been hiding things from me. And I'm done with it." Olivia's lips tightened, and for a moment, I thought she was going to lash out. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving mine. "You don't know what you're getting into, Bola," she said softly. "This isn't just about you and your inheritance. This is bigger than anything you can imagine." I couldn't let her control the conversation. "Then tell me," I said, my voice low and steady. "Tell me what's going on. Why was Adewale using me? Why was I dragged into all of this? What was my father really involved in?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering to the side, as though she was considering whether or not to tell me the truth. Finally, she sighed and leaned forward, lowering her voice. You've been so blinded by your emotions, Bola. But the truth is, your father didn't just leave you an inheritance. He left you a legacy. And that legacy has made you a target for people who would kill to get their hands on it. My breath caught in my throat. What are you talking about? Olivia shook her head. You're in over your head. But you don't have a choice anymore. If you want to survive, you'll have to play the game. A chill ran down my spine. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, but it was clear now. Olivia wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was part of this dangerous game, and I was stuck in the middle of it. I stood up, my heart racing. Then let's play, Olivia. But remember this. I will win. And as I turned to leave, I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The encounter with Olivia left me shaken, more than I was willing to admit. As I walked away from the cafe, the words she had spoken echoed in my mind. You're in over your head. She didn't know me. She didn't understand the depth of my resolve. But the reality she hinted at, that my father's legacy had become a battleground, a target for some dangerous forces, was a cold, hard truth I couldn't ignore anymore. As the days passed, the atmosphere around me grew darker. The calls and threats continued, but now they felt more urgent, more threatening. Whoever was behind this was watching me, anticipating my every move. David had been gathering intel, trying to uncover who exactly was pulling the strings. But so far, his investigation had only led to more questions. The deeper we dug into my father's dealings, the more convoluted everything became. My father hadn't just built an empire. He'd forged alliances with people whose motives were anything but pure. And somewhere in that web of deceit was the real enemy. But who? I was about to find out. One evening, as I was sitting in my apartment, going over some of the documents from my father's estate, I heard a knock at the door. Not another one of these mysterious visitors, I thought, my heart racing. But when I checked through the peephole, I saw a familiar face. Femi. I opened the door, relieved to see him, yet cautious. Bola, we need to talk, he said, his expression grave. I stepped aside to let him in. What's going on? Any progress on the investigation? Femi nodded but didn't sit down. Instead, he paced the room, his brow furrowed in thought. I've been digging deeper, and it's worse than we thought. There's a network of people connected to your father's businesses. The people he worked with, they're not just businessmen. Some of them have ties to organized crime syndicates, people who specialize in laundering money through real estate. I sat up straight, the weight of his words settling heavily on my shoulders. So, it's not just about the property. It's about something much bigger than I ever realized. Exactly, Femi confirmed. But it gets worse. I've tracked down one of the men who's been behind the majority of the shady deals. His name is Kingsley, and he's not someone you want to mess with. My mind raced as I processed the information. A man named Kingsley, a part of this network. But how deep did this go? How far was I willing to go to uncover the full truth? There's more, Femi continued. I've also found evidence that Olivia is more involved than we thought. She's not just trying to protect herself. She's been working with Kingsley. They're in this together. My blood ran cold. Olivia, my own sister-in-law. She had been playing me all along, and I had trusted her. But now it was clear. She had been using me, manipulating me, for her own gain. And worse, she was in league with the very people who had been threatening my life. I stood up, my fists clenched. Where is she? Where is Olivia now? Femi shook his head. I don't know, but I have a lead. She's been meeting with Kingsley regularly. I've traced them to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It's where they're conducting some of their illegal business. A sense of urgency hit me. This was my chance. I had to confront Olivia. I had to end this madness before it consumed me, before it destroyed everything I had worked for. I'm going, I said, my voice firm. But I need you to be there, Femi. I need someone I can trust. Femi hesitated, but only for a moment. I'll be there, but Bola, you have to be careful. Kingsley is dangerous. He's not just a businessman. He's tied to some very dangerous people. I know, I replied, determination hardening my voice, but I'm done running. It's time to take control. That night we drove through the city, our destination set on a remote warehouse. As we neared the outskirts of town, the streets grew darker, more desolate. It felt like we were entering another world, a place where no one cared about what happened to anyone. The tension in the air was palpable. We arrived at the warehouse, a cold, steel structure surrounded by high fences and overgrown shrubbery. There were no lights on, and everything appeared abandoned. But I knew better. I had learned enough from my father's world to recognize when something was off. Stay close, Femi whispered, his hand on the door handle. We don't know what we're walking into. I nodded, gripping the bag with the documents tightly in my hand. The last thing I wanted was to be caught unprepared. We approached the side of the building, moving silently, shadows blending with the darkness. I could hear muffled voices on the other side of the warehouse. Olivia and Kingsley. I felt a surge of adrenaline rush through me. This was it. I was about to get the answers I needed. We crept closer, our footsteps almost silent on the gravel. The voices grew clearer. I don't think she'll be as easy to control anymore. Olivia's voice was sharp and cold, filled with the arrogance of someone who thought they were invincible. She never was, Kingsley replied. But now she's made it personal. If she doesn't back down, she'll lose everything. You know that. I froze, hearing Kingsley's words cut through the air like a knife. I couldn't let them think they had won. This was my fight, and I wasn't backing down. With a deep breath, I nodded to Femi. We moved in, ready to confront them. But what I didn't expect was the sound of footsteps behind us. Someone else was there. I turned quickly, but before I could react, a sharp pain exploded in my side. Bola! Femi shouted, but it was too late. I collapsed, the darkness closing in around me as the world around me spun wildly. Everything went black. I woke up in darkness, my head throbbing as though someone had cracked it open with a hammer. My body ached, and every movement felt like a struggle against gravity. My side burned where I had been hit, but I couldn't tell how much time had passed. My vision blurred as I tried to focus, the sounds around me faint and distorted. The first thing I realized was that I wasn't in my apartment. I wasn't anywhere familiar. The walls around me were cold and industrial, the air thick with the musty smell of rust and concrete. My heart raced in my chest as panic set in. Bola! Bola! Are you awake? Femi's voice. He was close, but not close enough. His words were slurred, faint, as though he was struggling to speak. I tried to move, but my arms felt heavy, shackled to the floor. A sharp pain shot through my side, and I gasped, sucking in air. The room spun as I struggled to make sense of my surroundings. The last thing I remembered was being ambushed outside the warehouse, hearing Kingsley's voice, and then the pain. Bola, you're in a safe place, Femi continued, his voice a little clearer this time. You've been out for a while. They hit you hard. I tried to stop them. I blinked, trying to focus on his face, but the world around me was still spinning. Femi? I gasped, feeling a wave of weakness wash over me. What happened? Where are we? He sighed, a sound filled with frustration and regret. We were too late, Bola. They must have known we were coming. They got to us first. You were knocked out cold, and I barely managed to get us away from them before they started, well, doing what they do best. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Every inch of me screamed with pain, and I collapsed back onto the cold floor. Take it easy, Femi said, rushing to my side. I'll get you out of here. You're safe now. Safe? I wasn't so sure about that. The reality of the situation was sinking in. My life had been flipped upside down. The people I had trusted, my husband, my mother, Olivia, had all played their parts in this game of deception. The property, the inheritance, the dangerous ties my father had left behind. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. "I need to get out of here," I said, my voice hoarse but determined. "I need to find Olivia, Femi. I need to know what she's planning. I have to stop this before it's too late." Femi shook his head, his expression darkening. "It's not that simple, Bola. Kingsley isn't someone you can just confront. He's got connections you don't even understand. And Olivia—" He paused, clearly weighing his words. "Olivia is in way too deep. I don't think she's the one calling the shots." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the confusion, the betrayal, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. But there was one thing I knew for sure. Olivia wasn't just trying to protect her interests. She was trying to destroy mine, and I couldn't let that happen. I took a deep breath, ignoring the pain in my body as I tried to sit up again. This time I managed, though every muscle in my body screamed in protest. "We need to stop her, Femi," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I'm not backing down. I've lost too much already. I won't lose my father's legacy too." Femi was silent for a moment, his gaze softening as he watched me. "You've got more courage than I thought, Bola," he finally said, reaching out to steady me. "But this won't be easy. They'll come for you. They'll come for both of us. We need to stay one step ahead, and right now I don't have all the answers." "I don't need all the answers," I replied, my eyes burning with resolve. "I just need to know who's pulling the strings. I need to know who's behind all of this, and I need to confront them." Femi nodded slowly, though I could see the worry in his eyes. "I'll do what I can to help you, Bola. But you need to understand something. This game is bigger than just your inheritance. Kingsley, Olivia, they've got plans that go beyond anything we've seen. And if we're not careful, it won't just be your father's legacy that's at risk." I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't just about property. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, the kind of power that could destroy everything I had ever known. "I'm ready," I said, determination hardening my voice. "I've already lost enough. I'm not going to lose my future." Femi didn't answer immediately, but I could see the respect in his eyes. And maybe, just maybe, he realized what I had come to understand in the depths of my despair. This wasn't just a battle for money. This was a battle for my life. As we stood together, preparing for the next step in this dangerous game, I knew one thing for certain. Olivia, Adewale, Kingsley, none of them knew what I was capable of. They were about to find out, and I would make them regret underestimating me. The days that followed were a blur of strategy and action. Femi and I moved like shadows through the city, staying one step ahead of anyone who might be watching. But it was becoming increasingly clear. Olivia was not the only one pulling the strings. Kingsley, her partner in this twisted game, was the real threat. And the more I learned about him, the more dangerous he became. I spent hours at the library, combing through every possible lead, digging deeper into Kingsley's background. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how far-reaching his influence was. Kingsley wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of a network that stretched across several countries, connected to money laundering, illegal land deals, and even organized crime. My father's legacy had been a tool for him, a way to gain power in the real estate world, and I was the one standing in his way. But there was something else I found. A name that kept cropping up in all of Kingsley's dealings. Senator Emeka Okoro. It seemed like every major deal Kingsley had done, every shady transaction, had some connection to this powerful politician. If I wanted to bring Kingsley down, I had to take down Senator Okoro too. But how? Femi was the one who first brought up the idea. Senator Okoro is untouchable. But if we get to him, Bola, we might finally get to the heart of this thing. We can't go after Kingsley without cutting off his connections. I knew he was right, but I also knew the risks. Senators like Okoro weren't just protected by wealth and influence, they were protected by the system itself. If I made the wrong move, I could be walking straight into a trap. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already lost everything once. Now, I was willing to risk it all to take back what was mine. Then we go after Okoro, I said, my voice steady and firm. If we expose him, we expose Kingsley. Femi nodded, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. I'll do some digging, but we have to be careful. If Okoro has anything to do with this, he won't hesitate to bury us. We need solid evidence, something concrete we can use against him. It wasn't long before Femi had arranged a meeting with a source who had ties to the senator's office. A man named Namdi, a former aide to Okoro, had come forward with information that could change everything. I met with him in a quiet, dimly lit cafe in the heart of Lagos, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for him to arrive. Namdi finally showed up, looking nervous but determined. He slid into the seat across from me, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "Bola," he said quietly, his voice shaky. "I don't have much, but I know enough to get you what you need." I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "What do you know about Okoro and Kingsley?" Namdi looked around again, ensuring the coast was clear, before he spoke. "Okoro is dirty, Bola. He's been laundering money through Kingsley's real estate deals for years. But it's not just the money. There's more. Okoro's involved in land grabs, illegal land deals, using his position to steal land from vulnerable communities. He's been using Kingsley to cover his tracks." I could feel my heart sink as the weight of his words hit me. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. This was about something much bigger, something that could destroy people's lives. My father's legacy had been a tool in a massive web of corruption, and I had been unknowingly standing in the middle of it all. But then Namdi dropped the bombshell. "There's a document," he said, pulling a small envelope from his jacket. "A file that proves Okoro's involvement in the illegal land deals. If you can get this into the right hands, it'll bring him down. It's the only leverage you've got." I took the envelope from him, my hands trembling as I held it. This was the break I had been waiting for. The key to exposing everything, the key to ending this nightmare. But before I could say anything, Namdi stood up, looking around nervously. "You have to be careful, Bola," he warned. "Okoro's not just a politician. He has connections everywhere, the police, the courts, even some of the most powerful businessmen in the country. If he finds out you have this..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood the danger now more than ever. As I walked out of the cafe, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand. I felt the weight of the situation bearing down on me. I had the evidence, but now I had to figure out how to use it without getting myself killed. The stakes had just gotten higher, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake. Later that night, I called Femi. "We have everything we need," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We're going after Okoro." Femi's voice was quiet on the other end of the line. "Are you sure? This isn't just about Kingsley anymore. Okoro is untouchable." "I'm not backing down," I replied. "This ends now." And as I hung up the phone, I knew one thing for sure. This game of power and deception wasn't just about the property. It was about the people who would stop at nothing to keep their power. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to fight. And this time I would make sure the truth came out. The plan was set, but the closer we got to executing it, the more I realized how dangerous it was. The document Namdi had given me was the key to everything. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could spell the end of everything I had worked for. But if I didn't act fast, I would lose everything anyway. The inheritance, my family, my dignity. The truth had to come out, and it had to come out now. Femi and I met again the next morning, the weight of the task ahead of us pressing down on both of us. He had arranged for us to meet with a trusted journalist, someone who had experience exposing corruption. Her name was Amina, and she had taken down some of the most powerful people in the country with her investigative work. She was the key to getting this document into the right hands, into the hands of someone who could use it to take down Okoro and his entire network. We met in a nondescript building in the city, hidden away from prying eyes. Amina was a woman of few words, but when she saw the file, her eyes lit up with determination. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "This will take Okoro down. But you have to understand, Bola. Once this is out, there's no going back. Okoro will come after you, Kingsley will come after you, and everyone else involved will stop at nothing to protect themselves. You'll be a target. You need to be prepared for what comes next." I nodded, my grip tightening around the file. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were churning. "We can't let this go on. I can't let them win." Amina nodded, taking the file from me and slipping it into her bag. "I'll make sure this gets to the right people. The public needs to know the truth." As I left the building, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The truth was finally going to be exposed. Okoro's empire of lies and corruption was about to come crashing down. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was too easy, too quiet. And then, just as I began to let my guard down, I received a message. A simple text with no sender. "You've made a mistake, Bola. There's no going back now. We'll make sure of it." My blood ran cold. This wasn't over. I had played right into their hands, and now they were coming for me. I had no idea what they would do, but I knew it wouldn't be pretty. I immediately called Femi. "It's a trap," I said, panic rising in my chest. They know what we're doing." Femi's voice was calm but urgent. "Stay calm, Bola. We've planned for this. Just don't let your guard down." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we had made a fatal mistake. I had exposed Okoro, but in doing so, I had made myself the target. That night, I went home, locking the doors and windows, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The house was eerily silent. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing car outside, making me jump. I felt like a rat in a trap, and I had no idea who was coming to spring it. Around midnight, I heard the sound of footsteps outside my door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was just my nerves or if someone was actually out there, but I couldn't afford to take any chances. I moved quietly, creeping over to the window to peek through the blinds. There, across the street, I saw a black car parked with its lights off. The car was just sitting there, watching, waiting. And then a figure stepped out. A tall man, dressed in dark clothes. He looked familiar. It was Kingsley. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. He had come for me. He had come to silence me, to make sure the truth never saw the light of day. I quickly grabbed my phone, dialing Femi's number. "They're here," I whispered urgently. "Kingsley's here." Femi's voice was urgent. "Get out of there, Bola. Now, don't wait. Go." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed the most important things I could, my phone, the file, and some cash, and ran out the back door, my heart racing. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here, not with Kingsley so close. I ran through the dark streets, trying to lose them, my breath coming in short gasps. The adrenaline pushed me forward, even though my legs felt like they were made of lead. I wasn't sure how far I'd gone when I heard the screech of tires behind me. The black car. I sprinted faster, my mind racing. Couldn't let them catch me. Not now. I had too much at stake. But just as I turned a corner, I felt a sharp pain in my side, and I stumbled, falling to the ground. The world blurred, and for a moment, I thought I was going to pass out. But then, a hand grabbed my arm. I looked up, and to my surprise, it was Femi. He had tracked me down. "Come on, Bola, we have to move. Now!" he urged, helping me to my feet. He pulled me down another alley, the sound of the black car's engine roaring behind us. We couldn't keep running forever. But with Femi by my side, I knew we had one last chance. This was it. The final confrontation. The reckoning. We were about to expose everything. The alley seemed endless as Femi and I ran, our footsteps echoing off the damp walls. The black car was still following us, the sound of its engine growing louder with each passing second. My lungs burned with each breath, but I pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that everything I had fought for, my family's legacy, my future, was at stake. We rounded another corner, and I saw an open street ahead. A small, crowded marketplace buzzed with activity, the bright lights of street vendors casting long shadows on the ground. But the black car was closing in, its headlights cutting through the night like a predator stalking its prey. "We can't keep running, Femi?" I gasped, my voice strained from the effort. "We need to turn the tables. We need to fight back." Femi's face was grim, but there was a fire in his eyes. He wasn't afraid. "I know," he said, pulling me toward a narrow doorway that led to a building under construction. "We'll make our stand here." We ducked inside, the door creaking as it closed behind us. The dim glow of a single light bulb illuminated the dusty space, revealing unfinished walls and scattered construction materials. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give us a moment's respite. For now, we were safe. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breath. "What do we do now?" Femi glanced around the room, his mind already working. "We'll fight back. We've got to get to the truth before Kingsley can bury us." My heart pounded in my chest as I realized just how close we were to the end of this, one way or another. We either exposed Okoro and Kingsley for their corruption, or we became their next victims. Just then, I heard the screech of tires as the black car skidded to a stop outside the building. They were here. "We don't have much time," I said, my voice low. "What's the plan?" Femi looked at me, his jaw set with determination. "We hold them off. I've got a few contacts that might be able to help us, but we need to make sure they don't get to you first." I nodded, my mind racing. I wasn't just going to stand here and wait to be captured. This was my fight now, and I had come too far to back down. I glanced around the room, looking for something I could use. The old wooden crates, the piles of debris, everything could be a weapon. "Take cover," Femi whispered, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling in backup." I crouched behind a stack of crates, my heart thumping. The seconds felt like hours as we waited for the sound of footsteps approaching. I could hear the muffled voices of the men outside, the low hum of their conversation cutting through the tense silence. The door burst open. Kingsley entered first, his dark figure silhouetted against the streetlights outside. He didn't hesitate. His eyes scanned the room, landing on me immediately. "You're making a mistake, Bola," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "You can't win this. You're just a woman. You think you have the power to stop me? To stop Okoro?" I felt the heat rise in my chest. "I'm not afraid of you, Kingsley, and I'm not afraid of Okoro either." He chuckled, stepping forward. "You should be." But I wasn't going to let him intimidate me anymore. I stood up, taking a step forward, my voice strong. "I know about your dealings with Okoro. I know about the money, the land grabs, the corruption. And now the world is going to know too." Kingsley's smile faltered for just a moment, and in that split second, I saw the true extent of his fear. He wasn't just angry. He was scared, and that fear made him dangerous. "You think the truth will save you?" he sneered. "You've crossed a line, Bola, and now you'll pay for it." Before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots. The men who had been with Kingsley outside rushed in, their guns aimed at us. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively dropped to the ground, pulling Femi with me. The shots rang out again, the sound deafening in the small room. One of the men fired directly at me, but I wasn't going to let this be my end. Femi pulled out a gun of his own, returning fire with precision, his aim steady and calm. I wasn't sure how many rounds he had left, but the men outside were starting to retreat. They hadn't expected us to fight back, and that gave us the upper hand. "We need to move now," Femi shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the back exit. "This isn't over yet." We sprinted through the building's narrow hallways, the sound of footsteps pounding behind us. My heart was racing, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. We couldn't let them catch us. We couldn't let Kingsley or Okoro win. We made it outside, into the darkened streets, just as more cars pulled up. They were closing in. Femi's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and cursed. "They're coming, Bola. Koro's men. We need to get out of here now." But I wasn't going to run anymore. I had come too far. Too many people had been hurt. Too many lies had been spread. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about taking back control. I turned to Femi. "We can't run anymore. We take them down together." He nodded, a fierce look in his eyes. "You're right. It ends tonight." And with that, we turned to face the enemy, ready for whatever came next. The night air was thick with tension as Femi and I stood side by side, facing the oncoming storm. The enemy was closing in. Okoro, Kingsley, and the corrupt network they had built around my father's estate. It was all coming to an end tonight. The weight of everything I had been through, the loss, the betrayal, and the fight for my future, had brought me to this moment. This was the final showdown. We stood in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike, our hearts pounding in our chests. Femi's gun was in his hand, ready. I didn't know where my own courage had come from, but it was there, burning bright. I had never felt more alive than I did in this moment. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice, about righting the wrongs that had been done to me, to my family, to everyone who had been caught in the web of greed and lies. The sound of engines revving and tires screeching echoed through the streets as more cars approached. I knew they were coming for us, but what they didn't realize was that I had set my own trap. Femi turned to me, his face serious but resolute. "Are you ready?" I nodded. "Let's finish this." In an instant, we moved, darting toward the front of the building where the cars had stopped. There were at least 5 men surrounding us, but we were ready. Femi opened fire, precise and controlled, forcing the men to scatter and seek cover. The chaos was deafening. Gunshots, shouts, the sound of breaking glass. But through it all, I kept my focus. The truth was on our side, and no amount of violence could silence it now. I ducked behind a wall, keeping low, watching as Femi took down one of the men. My heart raced, not with fear, but with the knowledge that we were close. We were on the brink of ending this nightmare. Just as I was about to move forward, a figure stepped out from behind a car. It was Kingsley. "You really think you can win, Bola?" he shouted, his voice filled with venom. "You have no idea what you're up against. You're just a woman. What do you think you can do?" I stood tall, facing him directly. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Kingsley. I know exactly who you are. And tonight, the world is going to know too." He sneered, stepping closer. "You think exposing me is enough to stop this? You're nothing. Just a pawn in a game you don't understand." I didn't flinch. "You're the one who's been playing a game, Kingsley. And I'm done being your pawn." He reached for his gun, but before he could raise it, I fired. The shot rang out, echoing in the night, but it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the tires of the car behind him, which exploded in a shower of sparks, blocking his escape. Kingsley stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. He had underestimated me. I had the power now. "You can't run anymore," I said, my voice cold, final. "The truth is coming for you." At that moment, police sirens blared in the distance, growing louder as they approached. I knew that Amina had delivered the evidence to the press, and the entire city would soon know about the corruption, the money laundering, the land theft, everything. Femi looked at me, his eyes filled with approval. "We did it, Bola. We finally did it." I felt the weight of the moment sink in. The fight had been long, but it had been worth it. Justice was within reach. But even as I stood there, knowing victory was within our grasp, I felt the sting of loss. My marriage, my family, my father's legacy. It had all been tainted by lies. Yet, in this moment, I realized that it was not the past that defined me. It was the future. The police arrived, rushing in to secure the area. Kingsley and his men were arrested, their reign of terror coming to a swift end. And as the authorities took them away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had been affected by their greed and corruption. The press swarmed the scene, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions. But there was only one thing I needed to do. I walked up to the nearest reporter and held up the document that had been my weapon, the key to bringing down the men who had tried to ruin my life. "This," I said, my voice steady and strong, "is the truth, and tonight the world will know it." The next few days were a whirlwind. News outlets covered the scandal extensively. Okoro's political career was over. Kingsley's criminal network was exposed. The land deals, the money laundering, it all came to light. But for me, it wasn't just about the exposure. It was about reclaiming my life, my future. In the weeks that followed, the property that had once been a source of pain became a symbol of my strength. I had been the one to expose the lies, the one to take control of my father's legacy. But I wasn't going to let it consume me. I decided to sell the properties, using the proceeds to create a foundation that would help those who had been victimized by the same type of corruption I had experienced. As for my relationship with my mother, it would take time to heal. She had betrayed me, but I realized that it wasn't all her fault. She had been trapped in a system of fear and manipulation. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a starting point for understanding. And as for Femi, he had been my ally when I had no one else. He had risked everything to help me, and for that I would always be grateful. The world was changing, and so was I. I wasn't the same woman who had stood at the altar, humiliated and broken. I was stronger now, wiser, and ready to build a new future. One built on truth, justice, and the unshakable belief that no one should ever let fear control them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications button for more gripping stories like this.